A few years ago, political commentators expressed outrage or feigned outrage when Donald Trump said to American Jews, quote, "If you vote for a Democrat, you are disloyal to Israel and to the Jewish people." Now, this outrage, this not the sentiment is not new. I mean, Donald Trump is not the first Republican president to express frustration by American Jews' rejection of the Republican Party, despite the party's ardent support for Israel. Richard Nixon and George W. Bush were not as open or as blunt about it as Donald Trump, but they too were stung by the dissonance between the gratitude and affection they drew from Israeli Jews and the cold shoulder, to say the least, they received from American Jews. American Jews have long been one of the most reliable constituencies of the Democratic Party. In presidential elections, Jews' support for Democratic candidates has ranged from 60% to 90% since the 1920s, and on average stands at about 75%. Only African Americans surpass Jewish Americans in allegiance to the Democratic Party. And not only are Jews staunch Democrats, but they also have an excellent turnout record on election day. Over 80%, first among all ethnic and religious groups, turn out on election day to cast a vote. Moreover, Jews support the Democratic Party not only with their votes, but also with political donations and political activism, both disproportionately to their demographic weight in the Democratic electorate. Sociological studies show that for American Jews, like for African Americans, belonging to the Democratic Party has become the core cultural identity, not only as the Jews' group identity, but also as their individual identity. This means that most non-Orthodox American Jews understand themselves first and foremost as Democrats, not Jews. Their affinity group is not the Jewish nation or other Jews, but the Democratic Party and other Democrats. Survey after survey shows that in their private lives, few American Jews live lives that can be defined even loosely as Jewish. Few are members of a Jewish community or Jewish organizations. Few keep the Sabbath or celebrate other Jewish holidays. Few attend synagogue services. Few marry within the faith or raise their children exclusively in the Jewish faith. Few know Hebrew or feel a strong connection to the Jewish state. These findings about Jews' private lives or identity are reflected also in communal behavior. So even though American Jews are still the most charitable religious group in America, they contribute primarily to non-Jewish causes. And their voting priorities are primarily non-Jewish. For example, only 10% of American Jews list Israel or anti-Semitism as a high-ranking voting issue. Over 90% of American Jews rank the economy or healthcare or social justice or national security as their top political priorities. Just like Americans who are not, just like non-Jewish Americans, and especially like non-Jewish Democrats. Roughly 70% of American Jews see the Democratic Party not only as their political home, but, like I said, as their affinity group and identity group. And so as Jews have drifted away from their religion and their houses of worship, they also drifted away from the Jewish nation, from identifying and and connecting with their fellow Jews, drifting away from that and towards their fellow Democrats. In this sense, their family, their extended family, the people the people with whom they socialize and celebrate and identify and bond and marry, and the people whom they help philanthropically and politically are not Jews, but fellow Democrats. They're not fellow Jews, but are fellow Democrats. And this phenomenon has drawn endless debate and countless academic and journalistic studies because it flies in the face of what used to be thought of as an iron rule of American political sociology. And that is that as groups move from the margins of American society to the mainstream, and as they rise from poverty to wealth, they migrate from the left to the right. Okay? And Jews haven't done so. Jews have bucked this, again, this iron rule of American political sociology. And so it's attracted a great deal of interest from sociologists and social commentators. In 2009, Norman Podhoretz devoted a whole book to this perplexing observation in a book titled "Why Are Jews Liberals?" And in this book, he examines different explanations for this apparent anomaly. Now, American Jews' attachment to the Democratic Party, like I said, it's so puzzling because it runs against political analysts' expectation that Democratic voters come from the margins of American society. Okay? So the question that they investigate is, why have American Jews retained the political allegiance of a poor, working class, inner city, marginalized population, even as they have risen on the socioeconomic ladder, moved from blue-collar work to white-collar work, and relocated from the city to the suburbs, and assimilated and integrated into American society at an unprecedented rate. And all of these things helped American Jews move from the margins of society to the mainstream of society, and to wield considerable, disproportionate cultural, economic, and political influence in American society. Okay, so while if Democratic voters come from the margins, why are Jews still so staunchly Democratic when they're no longer in the margins of society? So first, sociologists can point out that Reform and conservative Jews, but not Orthodox Jews, check various sociological boxes that put them in the liberal left camp. They're highly educated, they're concentrated in metropolitan centers, and they're a minority group, either religious or ethnic, as you see it. A second explanation, or second observation, is that the left, and the socialist left in particular, has traditionally or historically been more open and accepting towards Jews. Okay, this is in the late 19th and early 20th century. So in Eastern Europe, it was socialism that brought about Jewish emancipation and integration in Eastern Europe. And this is because socialist groups were willing to look past religious and ethnic origins as long as people made the proper or correct class affiliation. And so if Jews were willing to not highlight their Judaism, but to highlight their class allegiance to socialists, or to the working classes, that was an entry ticket into socialist circles and institutions. So in both Europe and in America, left-wing politics allowed Jews to escape their traditional role as despised outsiders and become acceptable and accepted insiders in left-wing circles, especially socialist circles. And by contrast, during that time, up until the mid-20th century, country club Republicans and the Christian right exhibited open disdain for Jews. And so up until the mid-20th century, it was not a head scratcher. No one raised an eyebrow about Jews' commitment to the Democratic Party in the first half of the 20th century. Only since the 1970s, 60s or 70s, has it become an increasingly perplexing phenomenon, so much so that it is studied by sociologists and political scientists. Because when other, what's called ethnic whites, elevated their socioeconomic standing and assimilated and integrated into American society, they moved to the right, toward the Republican Party. Okay? And in the mid-20th century, and since the mid-20th century, definitely American Jews have, sociologically, they have elevated the socioeconomic standing. They have been assimilated and integrated into American society. They've been accepted into the country clubs, accepted into the country, accepted into the families of America's mainstream. And yet, unlike other ethnic whites who have advanced in this way and elevated in this way, American Jews remained committed overwhelmingly to the Democratic Party. Now, when you look at this, again, this iron rule of American politics, you can see the logic of it. Why it is that other ethnicities that rise in society and move from the margin to the mainstream move more, increasingly migrate from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, because their material and social and political success in America breeds appreciation for the American system that produced or allowed such success and acceptance and integration. And therefore, this success in America prompts an incremental migration towards the party that celebrates and aims to preserve this system, rather than the party that aims to fundamentally transform America, in the words of Barack Obama. But like I said, Jews buck this conventional sociological political trajectory. As they transitioned from immigrants to native-born Americans, from blue-collar to white, from inner city to suburbs, and from exotic others to normal Americans, Jews retained a strong allegiance to the Democratic Party. And this allegiance persists despite the fact that anti-Semitism is more prominent on the left in the ranks of the Democratic Party than on the right. So the most popular explanation for this sociological puzzle cites Jewish religious sensibilities, and namely the Jewish concept of tikkun olam. Tikkun olam in Hebrew means repairing of the world. It's an idea that's borrowed from Jewish mysticism about how Jews have a responsibility to work alongside God to establish justice in the world, divine justice in the world. So basically it says that, look, the Jewish religion commands Jews to work towards social justice, and therefore they gravitate towards the social justice party. The problem with this explanation is that American Jews have few religious sensibilities. American Jews are for the most part irreligious. They're not religious. They don't live committed religious lives. Multiple surveys over decades repeatedly reveal that Jews are the least observant religious group in American society, least likely to believe in the God of the Bible, and most likely to be atheists. Okay. More crucial, the small minority of American Jews who are strongly religious, roughly 20% of American Jews who are strongly religious and have strong religious sensibilities, they tend to vote Republican. Okay, so the religious motive for this attachment to the Democratic Party has serious limitations to it. A more convincing explanation is what's called the suitcase in the closet syndrome. Wherever they are in the world, whether it's Israel or Europe or South America or North America, many Jews will admit to having in their closet a suitcase all packed up and ready to go, just in case. Okay? Because one never knows when one will need to flee immediately. Okay? Now, today, for the most part, it's not a real suitcase. It's a metaphorical suitcase. Okay? It's a checklist. It's a mental checklist or an actual checklist for quick departure. Or maybe it's a bank account in a foreign country, or maybe a second passport or whatever else. Okay. But it was not long ago that many Jews actually had a real suitcase packed and ready. Okay. Diaspora Jews, meaning Jews who live outside the state of Israel, all have an emergency plan. Okay, a suitcase, a conceptual suitcase, to relocate to Israel or to some other country if their neighbors or their government ever turn on them, as neighbors and governments have done throughout history. And Israeli Jews are no different. Israeli Jews also have an emergency relocation plan in their heads in case Israel's Arab neighbors ever succeed in defeating the Jewish state on the battlefield and come and slaughter them. Okay, so this escape hatch mentality is a product of almost 2,000 years of being chased out at the point of a sword or a pitchfork. So Jews' extreme insecurity over countless generations as a minority in Christian Europe and in the Muslim Middle East, this sense of insecurity has imprinted itself on Jewish communities to such a degree that Jews encounter their non-Jewish neighbors and countrymen with trepidation and anxiety. Okay, Jewish history and Jewish folklore recount painful and humiliating experiences that Jews suffered at the hands of their Gentile neighbors. And therefore, every current report today, or every current experience of anti-Semitism, even mild, revives and primes this sense of insecurity for a new generation of Jews. Okay, so in the 1940s and 50s, it was extravagant violence and mass murder in Europe and in the Arab Middle East in the 1940s that reinforced Jews' sense of being a despised minority that must remain vigilant, constantly attentive to early warning signs of impending violence or discrimination or exclusion or whatever. Today, it's more targeted murderous attacks in France or in the United States, or it's blood libels against Israeli soldiers and doctors harvesting Arab body parts, or it's elite American universities permitting Jew exclusion zones on their campuses. Okay, so um, these news items remind Jews and revive these collective memories and fears in this commitment to an escape hatch. And the result is that Jews in America encounter their Gentile neighbors and colleagues and their fellow citizens with this packed suitcase in mind. Again, whether it's a real suitcase or a checklist. Okay, but that's how they meet the general culture around them. Okay, feeling different and conspicuous and insecure in the non-Jewish culture that surrounds them. Jews are and Jews are eager to demonstrate that they are good people and good neighbors and good citizens. Okay? And that if their Gentile neighbors and colleagues and governments permit them to stay, then they would be a benefit to the community. Okay? And you can see this in charitable giving. Okay? When private charitable giving in America is broken down by religious affiliation, Jews have long been the most generous by a wide margin. Okay? The most generous of any other religious grouping. According to the I forget Giving USA, that's the name of the organization that charts charitable giving in America. The average Jewish household in America donates $2,500 a year. And the next highest faith group, which is Protestants, gives an average of $1,700 annually. Okay. Moreover, 60% of Jewish families earning under $50,000 a year give to charity, compared to 46% of non-Jewish families of similar means. And so Jews have a record of being particularly charitable. But what's telling about Jewish charitable giving is that American Jews give roughly 70% of their charitable donations to non-Jewish causes, especially in their local communities. Okay? Whereas many other religious groups, the bulk of their charitable giving is to their churches, and through their churches to whatever charitable causes that they support. Okay, but American Jews giving is the majority, 70% of their charitable donations is to non-Jewish charities. It's just charities in the community. And to a great degree, again, this is the more convincing explanation than the religious one. To a great degree, Jews' attachment to the Democratic Party is part of the same Jewish appeal to the larger non-Jewish community that surrounds them. That if you accept us and let us stay, if you don't chase us out, if you don't kill us, if you don't exclude us and discriminate against us and chase us out, if you let us stay, we will help you. We will be helpful to the community. This eagerness to earn the good opinion and the acceptance of their non-Jewish neighbors is so deeply ingrained in Jews' cultural DNA that it is on display not only in the diaspora, where Jews are surrounded by Gentiles and could legitimately feel this insecurity, certainly cultural and sociological insecurity or estrangement. But it's visible also in Israel. Okay, it's so deeply ingrained because of 2,000 years of exile that you can see the same mindset, the same outreach in Israel. In Zionism's early days, Jewish immigrants brought with them to the Holy Land the hope that if they eradicated malaria and created agricultural and industrial wealth in that impoverished part of the world, um, the local Arabs will prosper, which they did, and thus will let the Jews stay. Okay? Meaning that Zionists hoped that by helping the Arabs economically, they could transform their anti-Semitism into toleration. And this remains to this day the logic behind, or the logic that informs those Jews who work towards Arab-Jewish coexistence within Israel and meaning between Israeli Arabs and Jews, and between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Okay, the hope is if we will help you, you might get over your anti-Semitic disdain for Jews and let us stay here. Okay? The desire to be accepted, to be permitted to stay, this was the mindset with which Jews approached their Gentile neighbors in Europe for thousands of, in Europe and in the Arab Middle East in exile for thousands of years. And it manifested itself in Jews' embrace of emancipation in Western Europe, their embrace of Reform Judaism, their embrace of secularism, of socialism, and of assimilation. And when the Jews were chased out of Europe and chased out of the Arab Middle East, or Muslim Middle East, they took this same mindset, okay, the same suitcase in the closet. They took it with them to their two main destinations, America and the land of Israel.